today's webinar, where we'll be looking at leadership development and personal effectiveness. These concepts are always important, but maybe even a little more critical this year. So we're really excited to get into the material today, and so glad that you've joined us. So a few things before we dive in. We will be recording this session, and we'll send out an email later with the links so you can access the material later. And we love for these webinars to be interactive. So we welcome all of your questions. You can type those in to the questions tab on the right-hand side of our GoToWebinar panel. We'll make sure we leave some time for those. If your questions are very specific to your situation, we recommend that you make a consulting appointment with one of our consultants through the North Metro Small Business Development Center. And I'll put a link to that scheduling page here in the chat, and you can also find that directly on our website, which is just northmetrosbdc.com. So I'm Hannah Curtis. I'm a coordinator with the North Metro Small Business Development Center, and so happy to introduce to you today our presenter, Jon Jaggers. Has years of management and leadership development experience, so we feel very fortunate to have his expertise today. So Jon, I will turn it over to you to get into our material today.
All right, thank you so much, Hannah, and thank you for this opportunity to share some leadership ideas, which, as you indicated, we are experiencing some very unprecedented times, both with COVID in particular, and that's what we're going to focus on, but also, you know, all the political turmoil that we're going through right now. So, you know, we're going to talk about present state, but we're also going to talk about future state, which hopefully as we go into 2021, things will be looking brighter. But certainly our times right now demand a lot of very strong leadership. So one of the things I like to do in a webinar is make sure or try to have effective learning outcomes. So, yeah, and some of the things we're going to learn today do create leadership competence. I've given this class probably 9 or 10 times in different organizations, and it seems to be pretty effective. And as I indicated, we want to have relevance to today's environment, but also the future. And I think that the principles that we talk about today are actionable both to our business life and our personal life. So we'll go into the COVID challenge. So really, these are very challenging times. The pandemic is, as a business owner, it's very, very critical to demonstrate effective leadership. You know, this pandemic has caused terrible disruptions, both from a health standpoint, health and safety, and the economy in particular. And I look at it from a leadership standpoint. It is a threat, but it's also an opportunity to do well. So we're going to, in this webinar, we're going to talk about some leadership traits that affect mutual respect, collaboration, clear and consistent communication, resilience, which is very important, and empathy for our employees. And again, this is not anything that we asked for. It's not an experiment we asked for. But the transition out of it, it's going to require a higher level of effective guidance or leadership. And you know, when that happens, when we do demonstrate that level of leadership with a clear, consistent, and reassuring message, it'll get us past that. So we'll just discuss each of these leadership traits. We're going to talk about clear and consistent communication, possessing a positive mindset, being trustworthy and open, being disciplined, becoming technically sound, and applying time management techniques, and last but certainly not least, demonstrating resilience. So, effective communication skills. I think it is very important that, you know, anytime we address our employees, that we demonstrate the same level of respect that we would expect for ourselves. that mutual respect that we demonstrate is one of the really the key elements to leadership success. And at the same time, I think it's important to be collaborative, to be able to work with and work through our employees, and while maintaining dignity and respect. And I think that is really critical. When you address your employees or working with them, I think that it's very important to have a simple approach and not a complex approach in your communication. Simplicity leads to focus, which produces clarity of purpose. And then the other point is make sure your message is consistent and reoccurring. I've got an example that I think is a great example. I ran a plant in Washington, Georgia for a couple years a while back. It was a very pretty complex plastic extrusion plant, but it was right in the heart of farm and cattle country in Georgia. And the employees they had a great work ethic. They were really excellent employees, but they had been through several different changes in a management approach. And so I found that very quickly that, first of all, it was hard to believe because there had been so many changes within a short period of time. So being repetitive and being clear in my message every day, probably for the first 9 months I was there, I would tell them the same thing every day. And after a while, that message was taken to heart, and they started to believe that I was real, and what I said I believed in. So that's just an example. You're laughing, man. Okay, so some communication tools that I think are really important, and I've used these with really my 20-25 clients that I work with right today. So the first thing is, I think from a standpoint of starting your day, whether it's the beginning of the shift or beginning of the day, is to have a quick huddle. This can be no more than 10 minutes of standing up and saying, okay, these are the things that we're going to attack today, and these are the expected results that I'd like to see. That's kind of funny. I told Hannah earlier that I've seen examples of this just in the last couple months, and I was in the right place at the right time. And perhaps you've seen it also, but I was at a Walmart at 7 o'clock in the morning. Sure enough, they were having a huddle. What were the assignments for the day? Who was going to do stocking? Who was going to do checkout? What were the special? And then at another time, I saw a road crew for CDOT on Highway 36. They're doing repairs, and right at the beginning, at 7 o'clock in the morning, they're having a huddle talking about, what were the assignments, talking about safety and things along that line. So I think huddles are important. The next point is talking about weekly schedules. Another technique that I think really works, no matter what your operation is, it's the beginning of the week on a Monday. Talk about what are the expectations from a standpoint of projects and work for the week. And you need to have your entire group there, and this gets everybody on the same page and the same mindset. This is what we need to accomplish for the week. So that's another effective technique. The other thing, that whether you have 2 or you have 20 employees, I think it's also good from a standpoint to meet with your employees on a monthly basis, just to talk about where you're at from a standpoint of the organizational metrics. Then also at the same time, get in the habit of asking for improvement ideas as you go through that meeting. And all these tools create accountability and involvement. Hannah, I think at one point you had mentioned to me that you like the idea of having the opportunity to make some positive suggestion. Is that right?
Yeah, I think we had mentioned, when you are soliciting for that feedback from your employees, how helpful it is for it to be a two-way street. And so for them to also be able to give, their feedback, for you to give feedback to them, for it to be really collaborative in that way, I think makes everyone feel comfortable and gives them that accountability, like you're talking about, that they do have a say in their job and in the company. I think that's helpful for everyone to feel like they have a seat at the table there.
Yeah, that's so true. Okay. Go on to the next slide. So active listening. Communication isn't just about talking or using body language, but it's also about listening well. And when you become a better listener, you improve your relationships, your social interaction, your ability to influence, and your ability to persuade and negotiate. I think it's a skill, particularly that bosses, they immediately think, well, I need to come up with a solution and not listen to those great ideas from your employees. And males in particular are great at, well, we're going to fix it. We're the fixers of the world. My lovely wife has taught me over the last 20 years that you need to listen. So, but it's a skill that it's also, I think, very, very appropriate to leadership.
Yes, I agree. And I would also add it's very important during this time. I know I've had a lot of calls from clients who sometimes just need to call in and put voice to some of their frustrations during this time. And through that process of having, a real human listen to the frustrations that they're having, it helps them move beyond that and can then lead to action. Maybe they've been frustrated with funding sources during this time for their small business. I know that's been a big issue for a lot of businesses. So being able to put voice to that and then move beyond that and think about the action steps of setting up a consultation with one of our consultants to talk through, well, this was your problem. You've now put voice to it. What can you do about it? I think that can be a really important process for small businesses.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So, okay, let's move on to the next slide. So conflict resolution, this is a leadership skill that unfortunately right now, COVID has created a lot of stress-packed environment with health and economic pressures. So it's a skill that is hard to develop, but it's got a lot to do with just staying calm, being non-defensive, and respectful. When you're in a conflict situation with an employee or between employees, I think that first of all, don't let the conflict fester, because it's just going to get worse. You need to deal with it, but you need to deal with it in a very respectful way. And when you control your emotions, you can communicate better from a standpoint of you're not threatening, wounding, or punishing others. And once the issue is resolved, then you can get back to work, and hopefully the environment calms down. So, and a lot of times it's got to do with compromise. I mean, conflict is some type of lack of compromise in whatever the relationship is. So, again, I said part of this is personal. So, okay, go on. The other piece of that is what I call emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is just the ability to understand, interpret, and respond to the emotions of others. It's really a clear understanding of how others are thinking and where their head is at. I mean, we in the work environment spend 8 to 10 hours every day working with our fellow employees or working for employees. And so you need to be aware of where they're at and demonstrate empathy if in fact it's needed. We're not, as owners and bosses, we're not psychologists, we're not psychiatrists, we're not there to resolve in-depth issues, but at the same time, we can demonstrate empathy and try to help as much as possible within the constraints of the work environment. Okay, so I noticed, Hannah, there's a couple of questions.
Yes. Yeah, a couple of questions with this emotional intelligence in mind and empathy in mind, but also with the rising stresses and pressures of our current day in mind. What would you recommend as the best way to communicate positive messages?
Well, I think that's a great question. You have to be brutally honest, is what it boils down to. I mean, we're all in the same boat, and you need to let your employees know, this is where we stand. Here's our sales forecast. This is what it looks like, and this is the staffing levels that we're going to try to maintain based on that forecast of sales. And also at the same time, it's good to talk about the strategy. And again, we talked earlier about, we're talking about the present state, but we're also talking about the future state. And I know it's difficult if you don't have the sales. If you're in the restaurant or bar business, things look pretty bleak. So you got to be very honest about where you're at, and don't dance around it. Just be honest. Okay.
Great, thank you. Another good question that came in, you mentioned the importance of communicating to your staff and having those weekly or monthly meetings. So the question is, for someone who only has 3 employees that they're communicating with frequently, is it still important to set aside time for that specific meeting, or should it just be integrated into the daily conversations?
Well, I think I'm of the opinion that a formal meeting at least once a week helps you do a couple things. You have to organize your thoughts and on what you're going to talk about, and also as a group, even though there may be just 3 of you, it still creates inclusiveness, and you've taken the time on a regular basis to meet and talk about the current status of your operation. Too many times we get caught up with the little fires that go on, or the pressures that go on, and you don't think about a good communication of really where the company's at.
Great, thank you. And you kind of just alluded to this, but our next question is about the structure of those meetings, the type of content to put into those meetings. It sounds like you want to be just straightforward and tell them as much information as you can while keeping a positive bent on the messaging. Do you have recommendations of what type of content to put into those meetings?
On the monthly meetings, I like to talk about metrics, company metrics such as sales, profitability, customer quality, or customer issues. But at the same time, you can also talk about, again, your strategies on marketing or different product development. But again, go back to what we talked about earlier. This is also a good time for asking for improvement ideas, because that way there's inclusiveness, and you feel like that you're contributing to the operation. Okay.
Great. Well, thank you. Those are our questions for now. So everyone who's listening, you can keep those questions coming in, but I think we're good to move on for now.
Okay. Okay. Another skill that I think is really critical is to be positive. And to me, what being positive is, and having a healthy optimism for the future of the company, your team, yourself, and life in general. And I just think that whenever you demonstrate that positiveness, it creates energy that is around you and can be amplified. I mean, you lead by example. Your employees are gonna pick up on your positive attitude, and it creates confidence and it creates excitement. And so that's just a can-do attitude will inspire others. But it's also important. Don't be swinging back and forth. And I know it's very difficult to always have a positive attitude, but be consistent in your positive attitude towards your employees, customers, and vendors. That it just creates an environment that inspires others, and I think that's really key. Okay. So create an environment of trust. This is I think one of the key leadership points that we all need to practice. So lead by example, and expect a high level of accountability for yourself and for those that work for you. And then the other part is integrity. Personal integrity is essential to build trust. You need to walk the talk, take your promises seriously, and work like heck to keep those promises. And as we talked about earlier, understand your employees' hot buttons, that emotional intelligence, that comprehension of where your employees are at will drive motivation from their standpoint. But then again, and this is where I'm kind of repeating myself, but I think it's important, provide opportunity for employee input and take the time to listen, fully hear and understand their viewpoint. You will be impactful by their needs and ideas. And I found over the 30 plus years that I've been in management that your employees, given the opportunity, have excellent ideas. Just you have to have a culture of inclusiveness and empowerment, knowing that they can contribute things and that they will be taken seriously. Okay. So operate with discipline and consistency. It takes courage on your part to make sure that you're providing vigilant and persistent direction to your team. A lot of times it's easy to bend the rules a bit, but you need to have the resolve to ensure the rules and regulations are enforced. And one thing I've learned, and I actually had a plant in Atlanta, Georgia, that was a combination of 3 or 4 different plants that had closed and were combined into one plant. And so everybody had an opinion on how to do things, and there was lack of communication and really chaos within the plant. And I told them when I walked in the door, I said, I'm going to lead you in a firm, fair, and consistent manner. Everyone is going to be treated the same. However, if you don't follow the rules, I will deal with it, and I did. And they learned to respect that approach because it was equitable to everyone, and so they didn't complain about it because they knew the rules were the rules. At the same time, when you run into inconsistency, you need to figure out, why that's the case from a standpoint, whether it's absenteeism or lack of motivation. Again, you're not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but be very frank and forward about where you're at and offer solutions, not complaints. It's a big part of your leadership responsibility to provide solutions, but also part of it is communicating well with your employees to get their feedback. Okay. Okay, I love this one. And this is millennials to a T. So I just love this. I work with a lot of millennials, and you guys are so creative in your approach. But anyway, from a leadership standpoint, you need to demonstrate technical savvy and a clear understanding as to how to optimize your business processes. If you think that you're running really well every day, There's always an opportunity to be better. But the big part of it is you need to personally have a passion to share that knowledge with your employees and your vendors and your customers. And at the same time, one of the key things is exhibit the knowledge of appropriate procedures for quality. And I work with several of my clients that are ISO certified. And so ISO certification is a very complex process for meeting quality standards. And they produce some very complex parts which require that. But any operation, as far as I'm concerned, can have quality standards that you both understand and adhere to. And the other piece of that is, again, getting back to employee empowerment or employee input, you need to encourage process improvement. And that's really just a willingness and ability to seek out opportunities to improve. So I think that being technically savvy is extremely important. Okay. All right, this is another one of my favorites. Time management. We all waste time. I teach a class on lean, and one of the biggest things that we talk about is not wasting time. But from a personal standpoint, if you take the first 30 minutes every day and plan your day with a to-do list, I think it's really critical. And on that to-do list, don't try to put down 27 different things because you'll never get to them. You need to focus in on those 4 or 5 top items that are gonna be have an impact on your operation for that particular day. So the other thing that is a trap from a standpoint of a small business owner is they try to do everything. Well, if you have employees, make sure that you delegate that responsibility. And I think, you know, that delegation is not just good from your time standpoint, but it's also a learning experience for your employees. And, you know, they feel better about it because they're given the responsibility. And then the other thing is, we'll get back to the huddles, communicated assignments first thing each day. And then it does take follow-up to ensure that everyone is on task and they don't have any hurdles or challenges to deal with. Okay. Because this is the last point, but I think it's one of the most important, most appropriate for today's world. Look at my little chart there. I got COVID at the end of the little domino thing there. So that was hard to find. But anyway, from a standpoint of resilience, it's really it's just showing determinations and persistence in times of challenge. It's also rebounding from setbacks. I know that many of my clients and started off the year just very enthusiastic with great sales and you know, everything looking very well. Come March and April, everything shut down, and it was a very difficult time. But those leaders that were resilient came up with ways to get around that and encourage their employees through those efforts, and they were creative and found ways to move ahead. Maybe not the same level as what we were last year, but they've been able to stay solvent and productive. And it's only because of their determination that they demonstrated. That's just such an important point. And times haven't changed. Unfortunately, right now, COVID is getting worse instead of better. And so we need to continue to make sure that we demonstrate that resilience. Okay. And the last point is just a wrap up. So, you know, what have we talked about? Clear and consistent communication, being positive at all times, being trustworthy, and being disciplined, being technically sound as you wonderful millennials are, apply time management, and probably the most important point right now is demonstrate resilience. Now, all of these different points will contribute to your personal effectiveness. All right. Is there any more questions?
Yes, we do have some good questions in here. This first one from a viewer, they ask if you can elaborate on the technical competence a little bit more. They're feeling that you don't mean that a manager needs to know how to do every job, like a manager needs to be telling engineers how to do their engineering work. So could you, I guess, just explain that a little bit in more detail?
Yeah, no, you certainly don't. You certainly don't need to know every technical aspect of your operation, but you need to have a pretty clear understanding of how things work, and have a mindset that no matter where we're at today, there are opportunities for improvement that will make your operation even better. And again, you lean on your employees for ideas in order to do that. The other technical part I really didn't talk about, but it's really important, is use software, use apps, and most of my clients use QuickBooks. They have some kind of ERP system. Their website is very well taken care of. So that technology is part of the technology that I'm talking about, and I think it's just in today's world, it's very challenging, and that is very important.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. It sounds like maybe the technology we're talking about needs to be more of the systems management rather than the nitty-gritty of each job. And as a millennial, you mentioned we do like our online tools and softwares, and I'm amazed by how many systems there are in place, especially during this time when a lot of us may still be working from home, that there's just so many ways to stay connected and to stay organized and to even integrate tools together under one platform. Just a lot of options out there, which is great.
That is a really key point there, Hannah, from a standpoint. And I've seen clients that do have different systems, but they're not integrated, and I certainly always encourage them to find the right tools to do that. So.
Yeah. So another good question. How do I balance the difference between discipline and empathy? How do you find that line there?
Yeah, that's a tough one. But again, if you go back to my favorite saying, being firm, fair, and consistent, that creates a balance between the empathy and the discipline. Employees like children. I'm not calling employees children, but employees like children, like structure, and they like discipline. They like consistency, but at the same time, you do all those things, but you also, in these trying times, you also demonstrate an understanding, a little bit of flexibility in how you operate. And that's the empathy part of it. It doesn't mean that you have to sway from the rules. All that means is that you're being a good leader, and you're being a real person to your employees.
Great, thank you. This next one I know is really important, and we've talked about it a bit, but if we could go into just a little more detail about the best way to encourage employee improvement ideas to really get that feedback from your employees and that buy-in from them.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the key to that, Hannah, is they have to be given the opportunity, okay? And they have to know that it is a culture of inclusiveness and empowerment from a standpoint. It's the message you send that you are going to listen to their ideas, give them the opportunity, whether it's at meetings or open door policy, to walk in and say, and I can remember a million times where employees have walked in and said, hey, John, why don't we try this? And the key is, if in fact you feel like it is an improvement that's going to work, you need to try it. And if it does work, then the other key is you need to make sure you recognize that to that employee, demonstrate recognition to that employee among their peers that, yes, this is a great idea, and yes, this helped our operation tremendously. These are the kind of things that we as leaders are looking for. And recognition goes a long way. I'm telling you, it doesn't cost a thing. Just a matter of speaking in front of other employees and letting them know that these are great ideas.
Great. Just something quick to add to that. I think it can be important to view, even if there was an idea that didn't work from an employee, to not view it as a failure, but as a chance for learning. And maybe an idea that does work will then come from that idea that didn't. So to have that opportunistic mindset, I guess, about ideas, and to encourage those ideas from employees, even if it on the surface level looks like a failure, what can actually come from that is important for us as leaders and also for employees.
Right, that's a great point, because it can be very discouraging if you you think you have a good idea and it's just blown off. That's not the right way to go. I mean, you need to, again, it's being honest and to your employees and say, well, that may seem like a good idea, and then talk through it exactly like you said. Maybe there's some other way to do the same thing.
Yes. So this next question has a big buzzword in it. Can you give an example of pivoting in a new direction during COVID?
Oh, absolutely. And as I said earlier, I've got probably 25 clients that have pivoted in different directions. In most cases, as you would expect, they are relying more on e-commerce. They've done a better job of having a very strong website with good SEO placement. I'm going to get off into my marketing hat here, but appropriate social networking, email blitzes, and actually a good point is there are several webinars on SBDC, North Metro SBDC YouTube, that go into a lot of detail about those techniques. But the other thing is, you need to make sure, part of the pivot is making sure that you're controlling your costs. If you're doing a good job of sales forecasting and communicating that to your employees, you're doing a good job of inventory control based on that forecast, because it's so critical. Cash flow is so critical right now. And then really doing a good return on investment, a good ROI on any expenditure you make. And do we really need this today? Is it something that's going to contribute to the operation, or is it just something nice to have? So, a lot of those pivot points that can be different. I know because you deal with a lot of clients, you may have some other examples.
Yeah, a lot of them have been very similar. And I think what's so important is to take the growth mindset with these pivots and these changes that businesses are making in their operations, and to forecast that into the future and take these changes with them into the future, and know that all these changes weren't just for right now to make it through this time and to survive, but are really beneficial to their business. And they've diversified their markets and their client base. Like you said, they've increased their marketing. Just so many of these changes that have been necessary during this time are also so helpful to carry into the future. And I think that can make it easier to implement when, it's not just for now, but it is really, really helpful for your business overall.
Yeah, that's a very good point, for sure.
And as John mentioned, thanks for the plug for our YouTube channel. You can also view all of our past webinar recordings on our website under the resources tab in our video library. So that's all on northmetrosbdc.com. And we do have a lot of webinars recorded there. This one will go on there as well. So a good way to find out what those resources are if you are looking at making new changes and pivoting in your business. So it looks like those are all of our questions for today. Do you have any last words of wisdom or advice for us, John?
Yeah, I think so. You know, particularly in these very trying times, it takes a lot of courage, tenacity, and as we talked about, resilience to lead our employees and to have that positive attitude that's going to drive us forward. You know, what we do today is going to have a big impact on the future, and you know, I'm always optimistic, and I think that, you know, once we get a vaccine and move ahead, that if you had demonstrated all these different things, you're going to be in a very, very good position to have a good, much better year next year and beyond that. So
Yes.
that's about it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the encouragement, John, and for all of this information. It's been really helpful. And thank you all for tuning in. Again, if you want to make an appointment with any of our business consultants, it's northmetrosbdc.com. We'll include all these materials in our follow-up email to you later on. And we thank you all for joining us, and we wish you a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank everyone.